The clip that you are watching is of a Ukrainian Buk M1, a medium-range air defense system, being destroyed by a Russian Iskander missile. The Iskander is a ballistic missile with a range of about 500 kilometers. It is not an artillery weapon. It is a theater weapon. It is something that is primarily intended to strike immobile targets such as various buildings, command posts, etc. Seeing it used in this manner to destroy a lone air defense platform that is standing in the middle of an open field is rather unusual. Now, previously I have stated that I am not a professional military expert. I'm just an amateur who is a little bit interested in various military hardware. However, I have actually talked to people who have served in the Russian Air Defense Forces about this matter. And they have also told me that it is a little bit unusual to see something like an entire ballistic missile being used to destroy a single air defense platform that is standing in the middle of an open field, especially since this isn't something like an S-300 or an S-400, which has much more impressive capabilities. Keep in mind that the stockpile of theater weapons, such as Iskander ballistic missiles, is expected to be fairly limited. However, all footage of the Ukrainian conflict that I have seen up until now shows that this isn't the case, at least not for Russia. Since the very first hours of this conflict, Russia has used all kinds of long-range weapons. I'm talking about standoff weapons such as cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, even hypersonic glide vehicles such as the Kinjal. And it is the sheer quantity of all of these weapons that Russia has been using that has really left an impression on me. I did not expect Russia to be using these kinds of weapons in this large quantity, for two reasons. The first reason is because Ukraine is not Russia's primary military opponent. One would think that Russia would want to save the majority of its stockpile for a potential, of course, God forbid, hot war against NATO. The other reason is that Russia still has a sizable stockpile of Soviet-era standoff weapons, cruise missiles such as the Kh-55, ballistic missiles such as the Tochka and the Oka, and it would be logical for Russia to sort of just use these weapons to get rid of them, so that their stockpiles can then be replaced with these more modern missiles such as the Caliber missiles, the Kh-101s, Kinjals, Iskanders, all of which we are seeing being used in the Ukraine war. Also, consider the fact that Russia now has basically total air dominance over all of Ukrainian territory. So it's not difficult for Russia to just fly a regular aircraft or even something much cheaper, such as a drone, and just bomb any targets in that manner. These aircraft don't even have to fly close to their target. They can still launch standoff missiles, which are much smaller, much cheaper, and much more numerous than these large ballistic and cruise missiles that we are seeing being used. Keep in mind that Russia is still flying regular manned aircraft and drones over Ukraine, and those aerial vehicles are bombing targets all the same. They're still striking ammunition depots, they're still striking fuel depots, regular military targets. But at the same time, Russia is using all kinds of heavy standoff weapons, from hypersonic glide vehicles to stealthy cruise missiles like the Kh-101 to ballistic missiles such as the Iskander. I don't think it would actually be inaccurate to say that Russia is using these weapons left, right, and center, just throwing them around like they're candy. Western media reports stated around the first week of the conflict that Russia used approximately 110, I don't remember the exact number, approximately 110 Caliber cruise missiles and Iskander ballistic missiles. Now, I should note that this report may not be totally accurate, but in any case, it is undeniable that Russia has used and is continuing to use every single day all of these weapons in significant numbers. Every single day we are hearing about large oil facilities being targeted, ammunition depots, and they're not just being targeted near the line of conflict, they're not just being targeted near Kherson Oblast, Nikolaev Oblast, near the Donbass region. They're also being targeted in western Ukraine, near Kiev, in cities like Lvov, Lutsk, and so on. And at the same time, you have reports put out by clownish Ukrainian media, really clownish Ukrainian media, which are saying that Russia is about to run out of weaponry. In fact, according to those articles, which I am going to post in the video description, these articles were written about a week ago. They were promising that by today, Russia would be out of ammunition. Not just large standoff weapons like cruise missiles and ballistic missiles, but out of all kinds of ammunition. Those are Russian language articles, by the way, so unless you know Russian, consider using an online translator. Also note that this collage of various targets being struck by cruise missiles, by ballistic missiles, isn't even 1/5 of all of the reports, of all of the videos that I have personally seen. And I don't think that I have seen even half of what has actually happened on the battlefield. Long story short, Russia has already used just a monstrous amount of standoff weapons, and it is continuing to use them every day, showing absolutely no signs of running out of munitions. And again, I would like to emphasize that while Russia is fighting this war in Ukraine, it still has to worry about other much more significant military threats, primarily from NATO countries, and it is always going to keep the majority of its stockpile in reserve for the event, which we hope will never ever happen, a hot war between Russia and NATO. And the primary reason for why Russia is using so many missiles, I think, is that, well, to put it frankly, Russia has built up a stockpile of an absolute shit ton of these weapons. This is where I am once again going to refer to another article, a Russian language article, which I will post in the video description below. This article was floated around the internet in late 2020, and it basically said that over the last 10 years, the Russian military has expanded its arsenal of long-range cruise missiles by over 10 times, and of all cruise missiles, including shorter range ones, by about 37 times. So if we are to believe these figures, and analysts have put the number of long-range cruise missiles that Russia had in 2010 at around 600. Actually, I should note that 600 describes only the number of cruise missiles that were going to be carried by aircraft, not naval cruise missiles, not land-based cruise missiles, of which Russia had very little, if any, in 2010. But nonetheless, the number of long-range cruise missiles that were designed to be carried by aircraft numbered at about 600. So 10 times that is 6,000. Going off of these figures, the Russian stockpile of these weapons is likely well over 6,000 if we also take into account the missiles which are stored on naval ships. Now that is a truly monstrous number, and it's not including the much larger number of shorter range cruise missiles. And when we're talking about cruise missiles, shorter range still means several hundred kilometers. I believe that this is the effect not only of Russia recognizing the importance that these weapons can have, especially in destroying an enemy's supply lines, fuel depots, ammunition depots, oil rigs, airfields, all of which Russia has been steadily destroying in Ukraine ever since this conflict began, but apparently with much greater fervor over the last several weeks. Not only are these weapons so crucial because they can penetrate an enemy's air defenses with great efficiency, which I should emphasize again, Ukraine basically has none, or effectively none, left at this point. But they are also much easier to manufacture than they were 20, 30, 40 years ago. Consensus on this topic seems to be that due to advances in material science, in 3D printing, as well as numerous other technologies, developing such munitions now is significantly easier and can be done significantly faster and cheaper than in the past, meaning that a nation can build up a much larger stockpile of these weapons. And I believe that we are seeing the effects of this play out in the Ukrainian conflict. Now, there might be another reason for why Russia is using so many standoff weapons. I would say that both reasons are valid. The second reason is that Russia basically wants to show off to the West, to Western military personnel, and to send a signal stating exactly this, that Russia has built up an enormous stockpile of theater weapons, and a much greater amount can be used against NATO powers if things escalate than has been used thus now in the Ukrainian war. Lastly, I would like to note the fact that Russia has used the hypersonic Kinzhal missile twice in this conflict. This is a monumentous event, or should I say two separate monumentous events, for a number of reasons. First of all, there was this very popular theory in both Russian opposition media, as well as Ukrainian media, as well as Western media, where the Russian opposition and Ukrainian media basically said that these weapons don't exist at all. They're just a bunch of cartoons, a bunch of fakes, a bunch of 3D fake videos put out by the Russian government. And the West was saying that these weapons, they might exist, but they're not nearly as effective, not nearly as accurate as Russia claims them to be, for all sorts of reasons. Both of these claims were proven false. The first combat use of the Kinzhal missile targeted a depot of Ukrainian Tochka-U missiles, which were stored in a facility in western Ukraine in Ivano-Frankovsk Oblast. Now, this facility, which was targeted by the Kinzhal missile, was essentially located dozens of meters underground. It was a Soviet-era military facility, which was, in essence, made to withstand a nuclear conflict. It was a very durable target, in other words. And that's exactly why the Kinzhal missile was used. Something like a Caliber missile simply wouldn't have had the firepower, the sheer velocity required to destroy such a target so deep underground, whereas an Iskander missile simply doesn't have the range. However, the Kinzhal missile has both the required range and firepower. Reports are from the Russian Ministry of Defense that this missile traveled over 1,000 kilometers in about 10 minutes. And the second Kinzhal missile is reported to have destroyed a large fuel depot in Nikolaev Oblast, which actually isn't very far from the front lines, but the Russian Ministry of Defense has stated that for some reason it was not possible to use any other weapon to destroy this fuel depot, which I personally find a little bit hard to buy. I think that they were just looking for an excuse to show off their new weapons, especially to the West, to prove once and for all that they have these weapons, that they have them in significant numbers, and that they are able to use them. And I almost forgot to mention that Russia has also used a number of its supersonic cruise missiles, which are primarily meant to target ships. We are talking about the Bastion missile complex and the Onyx and Yahant missiles that it uses. Anyways, that is all I wanted to say for today. This is just a quick video that wasn't thoroughly researched. It was sort of an off-the-cuff analysis / reaction to what I am consistently seeing through various media is happening in Ukraine. In a few days, I'm going to be making a few longer, more detailed, better researched videos about various events that are happening in Ukraine, including military ones, as well as the humanitarian side of this conflict, and of course, the absolutely ridiculous, cancerous propaganda that we are hearing from Western mainstream media. So stay tuned for that, and as always, please check out my Rumble channel, link is in the video description below. Thank you for watching up to this point. Peace.